I did not like this movie at all. In fact, I guess I'll just come out right out with from Front Street here on this. This came very close to being the worst MCU movie. It edged it out ever so slightly from Thor: The Dark World. This was a mess, essentially, in this one. Thor: Love and Thunder basically took what here's my interpretation, okay? I think it took what the filmmakers thought were the strengths of Ragnarok, which was I guess what they're thinking was the comedy. Turn it up to 11 and throw characterization out the window to a certain extent, which in some instances that could work, but it doesn't work very well with the character of Thor and with his previous exploits. Thor, if you remember, has some tragedy in his backstory. The murdering of his family, of Loki, things like that throughout. And to turn him essentially into a quippy doofus, I mean, he had some quips, some funny things in Thor Ragnarok, but what made Ragnarok, in my opinion, what made Ragnarok work was that you were used to having this character who was pretty serious and, and was to be taken seriously to a certain extent, and is thrown into maybe sometimes a crazy situation, but also is given little flourishes of comedy that were unexpected. And I think that was the strength of Ragnarok. They didn't go all out in the comedy. It was still a serious movie. I mean, in fact, if I recall correctly, Asgard was destroyed in Ragnarok to a certain at the end of that movie. So it was still grounded in some seriousness, but they added enough comedic touches to the movie where it didn't feel as much of a slog like Thor: The Lost World, or maybe not as bland as the original Thor. Even though I liked the original Thor, I will admit it's kind of bland. But we'll pass through that. The big issue I had with Thor: Love and Thunder is just the tone, because they just went hyper comedic, lots of quips, lots of gags, a lot of they really went heavily comedic in this movie, and I do not think it worked at all, especially when you're dealing with, let's say, a villain that is considered a god killer in Gore the God Butcher, and a potentially tragic subplot, which I'll get to in spoilers, involving one of the characters. So it really felt way off with what they were doing in Thor: Love and Thunder when it comes to the story and the characters involved. Now, some circles were not happy with the fact that they were essentially turning Thor into a side character in the movie, which I'll say, if you haven't seen the movie, that's not really the case. That's what happens in this. And I kind of liked where they were going with the Thor, Mighty Thor, Jane Foster angle that they were going here. Well, it's not really a spoiler because they really went into it in the marketing. Basically what happens is Jane Foster, who was the old flame from the first two Thors, becomes now the Mighty Thor and now uses Mjolnir to fight bad guys. It's essentially what happens. Again, this could have been done really well, I think, more in a dramatic sense, where you have this dichotomy where Thor has to battle with his insecurities, and deal with the person that he still loves, and also deal with the fact that maybe maybe not his masculinity, but maybe his purpose is being questioned because Mjolnir no longer finds him worthy, even though he has a worthy weapon with himself in Stormbreaker. Well, we'll throw that out there, but anyway. There could have been something very interesting in that, but then they played it for comedy again on this, and the comedy just didn't work. There were gags with the other weapon that Thor had as being jealous, which I just thought did not work and was pretty damn lame when I was watching it. I wouldn't, I wouldn't so much call it a cringe fest as something that just really, it really didn't. I don't think that the execution that they had on this really worked with what they went for in Thor: Love and Thunder, especially when it came to the comedy. There are some chuckle-worthy moments, I guess, but nothing too out loud hilarious. Let's get into performances real quick. I mean, Chris Hemsworth is Chris Hemsworth and Thor in this. I mean, that's nothing new. I mean, it's not. It's a standard Thor performance. He does nothing really exceptional in this. And I don't know if it was... I think it was the writing's fault in this and not more of Chris Hemsworth in this. But the comedy didn't really bounce off very well when it came to Chris Hemsworth's performance. I think that's the writing more than Chris Hemsworth on this. But yeah, I didn't really like that very much. Natalie Portman was actually pretty good as Jane Foster. I'll get to spoilers and to more detail with what she did. They gave Jane Foster more to do in this, so that's good because she's a very capable actress and she'd do a lot more than what she did in the first two Thors. But yeah, it was good but not great. Tessa Thompson's good. She's likable as Valkyrie. I heard that they were going to probably do more with Valkyrie in the future. I hope they do. I hope they try more in this. I have to give a big thumbs down to Russell Crowe as Zeus in this. Russell Crowe has a small scene in the film where he plays the god Zeus. I never thought I'd see the day where I realized that Russell Crowe might have limited range. But then again, I did watch the Les Miserables movie in 2012, and man, couldn't sing. Oh my God. But, yeah, I mean, he had this really terrible accent throughout the entire movie. And I guess you gotta do something different with when you're going to be Zeus, but man, did it sound terrible. Like, it was nails on chalkboard bad. Like, it was really painful to listen to. I want to highlight Christian Bale's performance as Gore the God Butcher, though. His performance is good, and Christian Bale is a very capable actor, and he could have been, I think, the thing that made this movie a lot better if they gave him more time, but they didn't. They barely had him in the movie. I think he was in it for like maybe 20, 25 minutes. And the idea of Gore is interesting and could be made into an interesting type of villain. But like I said, they didn't give him much time. And they did some visual flourishes to show like how scary he is. But you can only go so far without giving the character more time in this. So I think it's a good performance by Bale, but he was not given much. Or a lot of the stuff was cut from his performance. So that stinks. I would have actually liked to see more of Christian Bale. As for the direction of Taika Waititi, he is talented. I mean, and he did a very good job in Ragnarok. But I just feel like he took the wrong lessons from Ragnarok and put it into Love and Thunder. Because, people found the comedy funny in Ragnarok, no doubt. And I did too. But Ragnarok still was very grounded in the purpose it was trying to do, and what it was trying to do. It was meant to be... It was not meant to be as serious as the other Thor movies, because a lot of people found them kind of boring, especially Dark World, which I agree with, that I didn't like Dark World at all. But to go a complete 180 from deathly serious to screwball comedy and just being outright ridiculous at times with taglines and with like screwball comedy and stuff like that. Just it didn't fit well with this. I believe it didn't really fit well at all. And I think they should have taken better lessons from Ragnarok and realized that it was the blend of the two. Because you also had the subplot with Ragnarok involving Hulk as well, and how tragic what the tragic things that were going on with him. So they added some more of that, and I guess they kind of tried in this one with Jane Foster, but it didn't work quite as well. But yeah, I mean it's sad. Like I think this would have been a very interesting, different film that could have went a better direction, I feel. But I think overall it kind of failed at this. The cinematic theming, the visual themes of the film, they're okay. The use of 80s rock and a lot of 80s imagery, especially in the... if you watch the teasers and the posters, they look like 80s style metal albums to a certain extent. And the visual representation of, like, say, Gore's world, or the Shadow Realm, I guess, was interesting enough to, I guess, but it didn't really add very much to the film, I think. It just felt like to me that it was just a visual motif that made it visually interesting but didn't add much else to it, which is a shame because there is a decent story in here that could have been done very well, but I think the tone at which they were going on in Thor: Love and Thunder just it just didn't work for me. And I just sat there watching the movie questioning a lot of why they did what they did. And that's not what you want in a film when you are trying to enjoy the film, saying, why did they do this? Why did they go this route? Why that decision? That was a constant thing that was going on throughout the entire film. The outline of the story was interesting, but the execution, I think, left a lot to be desired. And I think at this point, it's sad because this actually had a decent story behind it that could have been interesting, but I think they really failed on the execution, essentially.